What's happening, guys? Pete back with you for an all new edition of the Music Box Pete podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. On today's episode, continuing our trek down the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks lane. On today's episode, we're going to do an episode all about cover songs. So it's not going to be, it's the most expansive list that I can find as of yet. But it's not encounter every obviously, I probably missed a few, but just going through all the binders that I've had, and just through the archives and everything that's out there, we're gonna go through some of the major cover songs that were omnipresent on the modern rock track chart. So a little something everything, and some I might probably even talked about here on the cast in prior episodes. So it's gonna try to be as in depth as possible too, but just go. We're not gonna go through like the whole history from from 88 all the way up until the present. I mean, there's some like ones from like 10, 20 years ago sprinkled here in between, but I think it's just a cool list and just sort of going behind the songs that were cover songs and just talk about the original artists that did it too as well too, and just the ones that made the cover version sometimes, very rarely, maybe even a little bit more popular than the original one, which has happened occasionally. Sometimes it falls a little short, and sometimes they're also on like hidden gems, which are some songs that are on like compilations or on like MTV Unplugged, or whatever the case may be. It's songs that really, just you really have to dig deep that weren't on the original artist or on the cover artist studio album. So you really have to dig deep on some of these too. So let's start things off with Letters to Cleo, Boston's own Letters to Cleo, and Cruel to Be Kind. Of course, the original song was done by Nick Lowe. And this song I just found it's such a differentiation because I listened a little bit of the Nick Lowe version in this one here. The Letters to Cleo was always a melodic band because what Kay Hanley done so well is just make things sort of melodic and really pop and break out on its own, and it really sizzles and does its own thing. But the Letters to Cleo's Cruel to Be Kind was absolutely incredible. I remember hearing them a lot, not so much originally when it came out in the 90s, but a little more so more recently, where I have a deeper appreciation of it. Because when the song originally came out, I think it was like 8 or 9 when it originally came out. But to hear it now, it sounds so refreshing, original, and really makes it stand pop and stand out and does its own thing completely. So definitely a great cover song in and of its own, and just one that really helped establish Letters to Cleo as a formidable presence and a really an omnipresent band on the modern rock tracks chart. Next up, this song we definitely have featured before, and talked a lot about it. Of course, and little connection, or a little 6 degrees of separation here with the Boston band, the Lemonheads, with their cover of Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson. I just absolutely adore it, and it's one of the few songs on this list where I adore the cover version more than the original. I mean, I always like Simon and Garfunkel here and there, but I think the Lemonheads just did its own thing too. It's so endearing. Of course, it was featured in American Pie 2, and all sorts of things over the years. Just, I heard it all the time on F and X back in the day. And I think the Lemonheads too, just, what Evan Dando and the guys did just with this song is absolutely incredible. And checked out the music video for it too. It was so, fun loving, just it was so carefree back in the days too. It was a different time for music back then, as it is with every era. And just, looking at back at the Lemonheads and what they were able to do, it was just absolutely incredible. So Lemonheads Mrs. Robinson is on the list. Next up is Urge Overkill with their cover of Girl You'll Be a Woman Soon, which was originally done by Neil Diamond. This song I was really impressed with, and I was really kind of impressed with both versions, both the Urge Overkill version and the Neil Diamond version. I thought both versions just really set itself apart. It kind of has that sort of little dark edge, especially obviously the Urge Overkill's version was on the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, so that's how it sort of gained prominence along with all the other songs on there as well. But just with Urge Overkill, what it's able to is kind of has this little bit of a, especially with the lyricism, it's a little bit creepy and a little bit ominous. Just some of the lyricism on there, but I think just what in it of itself, it's such an amazing song in it on its own, and really has this ability to just really immerse yourself in just the atmosphere, especially in the whole Pulp Fiction soundtrack, which is probably one of the top film soundtracks of all time in my opinion. I think with Urge Overkill and what they were able to do was absolutely phenomenal, and just really takes a little bit, take the listener on a little bit of journey of sorts too, and I just thought it was just absolutely incredible. So Urge Overkill, Girl You'll Be a Woman Soon is on the list. Next up is Alien Ant Farm's Smooth Criminal. Obviously, cover the Michael Jackson tune. I just found this, especially, talking about summer of '01 music, and just we had an episode devoted to that about a month or two ago. And Smooth Criminal was just an absolutely incredible song. I just remember That song being all over alternative radio. It reached #1 on the chart, and just it was everywhere. It crossed over crossed over the Billboard Hot 100 as well too. And Alien Ant Farm were always a goofy band too, and so they had signed to like New Noise Records, which is an offshoot of DreamWorks, if I remember correctly. I think New Noise was an imprint label of Kobe Dick from Papa Roach. So there was a little bit of a 6 degrees separation, a little connection with Papa Roach there. And Alien Ant Farm was one of the bands that got signed by Papa Roach's label, New Noise. So it just and Papa I was a big fan of Papa Roach back in the day, but Alien Ant Farm, their cover of Smooth Criminal really set them over the top. And I think they released this was actually the second or third single released from the album because the first single that was released from the album didn't do too well, didn't fare well in the charts, but Smooth Criminal, did itself on its own. The music video was so tongue in cheek and so incredible. And just it really was just an absolute it was an incredible time in music history that'll never be replicated, never be duplicated ever again. Just Summer of '01 was just the perfect, it was just the perfect there was sort of a level of serenity too, especially sort of the pre 9/11 days, which we're going to talk about in an episode or two coming up soon. In fact, right after Labor Day, we're going to talk about that too. Just sort of, the difference in music between pre and post 9/11 and also the 9/11 band songs list, which is one thing I've always wanted to develop up, but we'll revisit that at a later time. But Alien from Smooth Criminal, just in of itself, incredible cover song in its own right. Next up is Red Hot Chili Peppers' Higher Ground. Obviously, the original was done by Stevie Wonder. Um, this song was incredible too. It sort of had a different element than Stevie Wonder's version, but sort of kept it within the funk realm. I think just in itself and what it did was just absolutely incredible and phenomenal. And they just did things, and of course, Chili Peppers always do things in their own way, and they're always so especially with their live stage presence. I saw them a concert back in '06. The Mars Volta had opened from. This is at the TD Garden, and just the Chili Peppers just were so incredible too, and they're just they never stand still on stage, never. Flea and Anthony and all the guys. But their cover of Higher Ground in itself was just absolutely incredible, and just it did its own thing to stand out from among the pack, but did not distract from the original, of course. Next up is Soul Asylum, who did a cover of Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing. This song I had never heard before. I was just combing through the charts and looking through some interesting cover songs. This one I'll have to check out. Obviously, I can't really comment without hearing both songs side by side and doing a comparison, but it was sort of interesting they decided to go down this route too, and I'll have to explore it a little further. But Soul Asylum was definitely very omnipresent in the modern rock track chart, especially the early to mid '90s, that whole era of music, and they just they did such an incredible service to those who listened to them. I just think a lot of especially the bands in the '90s, especially when it was overtaken by grunge, and then after Kurt Cobain died and everything, music started sort of delve in different directions, started to get a little bit more harder edge as well too. I know Soundgarden sort of took the torch a little bit after Kurt died, but I think after that bands started coming their own, and Soul Asylum were just one of those bands, because I think Soul Asylum, I believe, was from Seattle, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure they were. I think that their cover of Sexual Healing. I'll need to do a little comparison to that too. So they're on the list. Next up is 10,000 Maniacs with their cover of Patti Smith's Because the Night. Hearing both of their songs, I think the 10,000 Maniacs ones I remember more than the Patti Smith version. And I think this is on the MTV Unplugged album, if I remember correctly. And hearing 10,000 Maniacs, I heard that all over radio too, and it got a lot of airplay. It also was sort of impetus. I think what radio programmers did back in the days was to put the cover songs, but also implore the listener to check out the original version as well too, and just sort of draw a little comparison and see how things sort of, because they sort of think of it as a little like stencil of sorts, or as a little when you do those like stencils in like art class and try to create your own different versions, sort of color in between the lines and put your own interesting spin and unique take on things. I think the same could be applied with like cover songs as well too, where you're doing your own thing and just you're trying to have a different perspective of the song or interpreting it a different way, because there's no right or wrong answer in my opinion. When you're doing a cover song, you sort of develop something that's new, and just in of itself I think is just it's your own interpretation of things too. And I think that's all well good of itself too, but it's also paying homage to the original version as well. So 10,000 Maniacs did an incredible job with Because of Night. Next one up, and this is another one that I haven't heard before, going back to Soul Asylum, The Cure's Purple Haze cover of the Jimi Hendrix song, which I believe is on a Jimi Hendrix tribute album. One thing I noticed, especially going through the '90s, there were a lot of tribute albums as well too. So they did, I don't know if it's like benefit shows or like shows that were on like cable or something too. I remember there's a lot of those like benefit shows and that sort of thing. They did a lot of like cover songs too, and sometimes you might see the specials on like PBS or something too. I know like George Harrison, some of those specials as well too. But the Cure's cover Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze, I'll need to develop um an appreciation for and delve deep into more because I mean I can only speak for the Jimi Hendrix version. I can't really speak for the Cure version. So again, I'll have to do a little side by side comparison. But again, this is such a quick list that I burst up to and just sort of delve in between two. So obviously some songs I might have missed. So obviously I'm gonna omit some and leave some out. Again, it happens, but it's such an exhaustive list and trying to comb through everything. But yeah, I'll definitely develop that as well too. Next up is Sonic Youth with Superstar. Of course, Superstar was originally done by the Carpenters. And this isn't going in the same vein of an artist-specific, covers album or tribute album, as they like to say. And my mom is huge into the Carpenters and still is to this day. Um, but this was sort of an interesting thing to sort of, a band that was really on the present in the '90s, like Sonic Youth, doing a cover of the Carpenters song. I really need to delve into that because, just sort of different tempos and different vibes and whatnot. Because, Carpenters were sort of, very adult contemporary, and they sort of helped develop the early '70s sound too, because when the late '60s, after the whole hippie, Vietnam protest and Woodstock movement and all that, and as the '70s began, it started to delve away from the whole hippie and psychedelic era into more like singer songwriter and adult contemporary sound. Carpenters sort of developed were sort of the early pioneers of that whole sound too, and Sonic Youth covering that too. I really need to listen to that too because I'm really intrigued by that. See how to develop. Next up on the list is Stone Temple Pilots' "Dancing Days" with their cover of the Led Zeppelin tune. This song I absolutely adored, and just I like the Led Zeppelin version as well. Probably like the Stone Temple Pilots, probably a shade above the Led Zeppelin, but not much. I think Led Zeppelin will still take the cake here. But the Stone Temple Pilots' "Dancing Days" song was absolutely incredible too. Just and of course, I heard that song all over radio as well too, and I think it has its own unique flavor and unique spin, and I think it was just an absolutely incredible song in of its own right. And there's so many ones too, but I think probably the best one I started to develop and listen over the years is Nirvana's cover of David Bowie's "The Man Who Sold the World." I think just with all the different covers, it's not a instance of like which one is better and that sort of thing. But I think Nirvana's cover of David Bowie's "The Man Who Sold the World." Obviously, this is on the MTV Unplugged album, which is absolutely incredible. It's very soul heart wrenching and soul inducing too, and just it really crushes your soul just hearing that song too, because that's sort of the talent of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, just their ability to really make you emotionally involved. Because he's not very lovey-dovey guy, Kurt. He never was, but sort of he had that emotional spirit, especially when it comes to doing cover songs and all that other song too. Um, and I think that he also did a cover of Leadbelly's "Where Did You Sleep Last Night," I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And I think that might have been on the MTV Plug, if I remember correctly, or was released on some other album. I'm trying to remember which one it was released on, but just sort of their ability to do cover songs just really, set them apart from the others too. And all the, different covers over the years too. But probably the best one that I can remember, if we're talking about like just sort of the best cover where the cover sort of really overtook the original by a mile, was probably Johnny Cash's cover of Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt." And I think Trent Reznor said in an interview that it's not my song anymore. It's Johnny's now. And that was released on Johnny's final album, American For the Man Comes Around, the last album he's working on when he died. Um, and I think Johnny Cash also did a cover of Depeche Mode's "Personal Jesus," if I remember correctly too. So just he was just some, especially the songs that he was working on before he died, but doing the cover of Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt" was just absolutely soul and I remember the video of that too because that featured um his wife June, and she died like a couple months after they shot the video for it. I think June had died in May of '03, and Johnny followed 4 months after. So it was so soul inducing too. But I think with these cover songs too, just you develop a deeper appreciation, not only for the artists who covered them, but for the original artists as well too. It's sort of like music appreciation 101. If you're like taking a course at Berkeley, this would probably be it. But it was just absolutely incredible in of its own right, and I just all the different covers that were done over the years too. Just it really just developed its own sonic, appreciation. It just really you disappear into this wave of sonic bliss that just, these waves that are sort of coming in the ocean. I just think it's just so incredible, and you just really get immersed in it too. And I certainly did as well too with all these different cover songs I heard over the years. Some I'll have to explore a little bit more. Um, but yeah, in of itself, everything was just incredible. Um, and I think I'm just gonna do Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah, but I think Hallelujah never charted in the Modern Rock Tracks chart. If it did chart, I definitely would have featured here. I know Jeff Buckley only had one song that charted the Modern Rock Tracks chart, and I think it was Last Goodbye. That was the only song that charted the Modern Rock Tracks chart. So it was just in of itself just absolutely incredible. And you can't say enough about that. Obviously, the original was done by Leonard Cohen. um but yeah, just I definitely would have featured here in the cast, but just getting a little tribute there. Even though it wasn't featured in Modern Tracks, you always have a soft spot in your heart, especially for Jeff Buckley, which I actually just started the movie. It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley. I started the Kendall Square Cinema just last week, and it's absolutely incredible. So it has a limited run in theaters right now, and it's going to be released, I believe, on HBO Max later on this fall. So if you miss it in theaters, it'll be on HBO Max later this fall, sometime in October. With all the different cover songs, and there's just so many different ones too. It's hard to pick your favorite, but you develop just this deeper appreciation for the artist for actually going out and taking the initiative to actually cover the song too, because it's a lot of work that goes into it. So but yeah, why don't we close out with Urge Overkill's cover of Neil Diamond's "Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon." Just I absolutely love the song, and just it kind of has a little creepy edge, it little sets it apart. Thanks once again for tuning in to the Music Box P podcast. See you next week.
Girl, you'll be a woman soon. I love you so much, can't count all the ways I died for you, girl, and all they can say is he's not your kind. They never get tired of putting me down, and I never know when I come around what I'm gonna find. Don't let them make up your mind. Don't you know, girl, you'll be a woman soon. Please, come take my hand. Girl, you'll be a woman soon. I've been misunderstood for all of my life. Over there saying girls just cut like a knife. The boy's no good. Well, I finally found what I'm looking for, but if they give a chance, I'll end it for sure. Surely they would. Baby, how can I could? Now it's up to you, girl. You'll be a woman soon. Please, come take my hand. Girl, you'll be a woman soon. Soon, you'll need a woman. But soon you'll need her.